I want to talk tonight a little bit more about these army topics that we've been talking about, but I want to wind back the clock and talk about a historic army topic. Like this. For most of Jewish history, since the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Jewish people could not be in the army. There was almost no country that wanted Jewish soldiers in their army. Jews were always second-class citizens, whether they lived in Arab countries or in Christian countries. It's very understandable that a Jew would not have joined the Crusades, right? Even though there's a Tosfos, Rabbeinu Elchanan writes that a Jew shouldn't join the army, which sounds like there was some Jews who were joining the army. But it's easy to understand why a Jew wouldn't join the Crusader armies, and it's easy to understand why a Jew wouldn't be part of Muhammad's armies. Muhammad didn't like the Jews very much. Jews were not really part of the armies. There was like exceptions here and there, Shmuel HaNagid, maybe his son Rabbi Yosef HaNagid. There was a few exceptions throughout Jewish history of Jewish soldiers, but by and large, Jews were not in the army. The first time it really became a shayla for Jews to join the army was in the French Revolution. After Napoleon took over the French government in the late 1700s into the early 1800s, he wanted French Jews to participate in the army. As a matter of fact, he formed the Sanhedrin. Napoleon formed the Sanhedrin in the late 1700s. He took Rabbi Yosef Tzinsheim, who was a Rav in Paris, a very striking-looking Rav. You could look him up afterwards. Like a long split beard and a very interesting hat. A striking figure. He made him the Av Bezdin, and they appointed a large amount of people to the Bezdin. Some of them Talmidei Chachamim, some of them decidedly not Talmidei Chachamim. And he presented to them 15 questions about Jewish identity. Like questions about what is the character of a Jew. Question number 6 that he asked the Sanhedrin in his first official communique with the Sanhedrin was, what is the status of Jews joining the army? Could Jews join the army? And Rabbi Yosef Tzinsheim wrote that it's a privilege for Jews to join the army, to be able to fulfill their nationalistic duty, to carry their part of the load of the national load. And yeah, Jews deserve to be part of the army. Jews should be part of the army. It's their privilege. Now, we kind of know how that ended up with the Dreyfus Affair, like 100 years later, Jews in the French army. But Jews were able to join the French army. Now, whether or not Yosef Tzinsheim meant what he said, if that was like his real Das Torah, or that was something that he was saying to Napoleon because that's what he had to say, we'll leave that an open tab. The Chassam Sofer famously said about Yosef Tzinsheim in the Hesped that he gave him to Yosef Tzinsheim, the Chassam Sofer said he was a professional at being Megala Tefach Mechasat V'chayim. He would reveal one Tefach and he would hide much more than he was revealing. So he was a master at giving just the right amount of true information to the government who was inquiring of it without saying anything that was, halachically impermissible or hashkafically questionable. And at the same time, not taking it too far. He was like a professional at threading the needle, which made him very, very suitable for the job that he occupied, the space that he occupied. In any case, after that, Jews started joining armies. And to the point where I read an article somewhere, in World War II, guess how many Jewish soldiers were involved in World War II?
20,000.
Way too low. Over 1 million Jewish soldiers.
World War I had well over 1 million.
No, the World War II had over 1 million Jewish soldiers.
Multiple armies?
500,000 in the Russian army, close to 500,000 in the American army, and tens of thousands in the British army. Now granted, most of these people were not religious, certainly the Russians and most of the Americans. There was a small amount of religious Israeli or Jewish, Zionists who participated in the wars. They signed up they volunteered to sign up. But by and large, they weren't religious people. But a tremendous amount of Jewish soldiers participated in the army. I think today it's dipped back down. And if you take the IDF out of the equation, there's not a lot of Jews who are serving in the army. There's a few, right? There's a few Lakewood people, but not a ton, right? A few famous Lakewood military men, but not a ton of Jews serving in the army. Now, one of the most tragic army Jew stories is the story of the Cantonists. Now, we think about Cantonists as some ancient history, and it is ancient history. It's a law that was passed in 1827 by Tsar Nikolai I, I think, who passed a law forcibly conscripting Jewish children into the Tsar's army, into the Russian army. It was a brutal law because it took kids who were officially from 12 years old and on. In practice, it took kids much younger. 7, 8, 9-year-old kids were brought into the army. They'd first be sent to a preparatory school until they were 18. And then at 18 years old, they were forcibly conscripted into the army for a 25-year period to serve the Tsar's army. So it was a real life-changing event when you got drafted into the Tsar's army. And it was a very, very traumatic matter for Klal Yisrael as a whole. It was very traumatic for Klal Yisrael. Like, if you read from the different people who write about the time, I read Lamashal, there's a sefer called Zichron Yaakov from Rabbi Yaakov Lipschitz. He's the editor of the Yated, Rabbi Lipschitz's grandfather, great-grandfather. He was a journalist himself. He wrote a sefer called Zichron Yaakov. Like, it's articles. It's really the editor's view. Articles of what's going on. In the back of Chelik Beis, he has something about the Cantonists, and he writes over there that the time is coming where you'll scarcely see someone who is the Cantonist anymore. He writes about it like the way we write about Holocaust survivors, like the way we talk about Holocaust survivors. Like you almost don't see people with numbers on their arms anymore. Like he writes, we almost don't see people who served in the Tsar's army. If you want to see them, he says you have to go to the Beis HaKvaros. In the Beis HaKvaros, you could find thousands of them. There was whole cities, like in the Siberian, tundra, in the frozen Siberian tundra, that were comprised of former Cantonists. When they would graduate out of the army, they were so disconnected and disenfranchised from Yiddishkeit and from the Kehillah. They made their own Kehillas in different places, like they had their own Beis HaKvaros, their own shul, etc. So he writes, you want to see them, you have to go there. Now, there's rather just, like a very poignant story about the Cantonists. I happen to like the story. There's a lot of versions of it. Some say it about the Rebitzel of Alazhner and the Tzemach Tzedek. Some say it about Chaim and the Rashab. Either way, there was a Rosh Hashiva and a Lubavitcher Rebbe who were on official government business, going to petition the Tsar for something, and they ended up in a Cantonist shul in Yom Kippur. They came to the Canton shul in Yom Kippur, and it was coming the Ela time. I think Kol Nidre, that's at the beginning, and they humbly suggested that maybe one of us should lead the services. They weren't insulting the Cantonists, but like it's a simple folk. You have the privilege of having one of the most prominent rebbes and one of the most prominent Roshivas. Like maybe one of them should be the Chazan. And the guy who was supposed to be the Chazan, Yankel, the Cantonist, he got up and he pulled up his shirt and he showed the welts on his back and all the bruises and the scars that were there. And he says, I'm not a Rebbe, I'm not a Rosh Hashiva, but I have this. And Rav Chaim and the Lubavitcher Rebbe or the Rebitzel and the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, you're right, you deserve to go first, you should have a And legend has it, he got up there and he said as follows. He says, Rebbeinu Shalom, on this night of Yom Kippur, every Jew comes to shul and he wants three things. He wants Bani, Chaim, Mizani. He wants children, life, and Parnasa. He says, but us Cantonists, Bani, we don't have children. We were in the army till we were in our 40s or 50s. Most of us are bachelors for life. We don't have children. We don't have anything to ask for. He says, Chai, long life. What do we need long life for? We're miserable. We're broken. We're beaten. We're just existing. We don't need long life. It's kill us. Take us when you want. And he said, Mizani, Parnasa, Star Nikolai gives us Parnasa. He gives us a pension. We get a pension. We don't need you for that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So I'm here, he says, with empty hands. I don't need anything from you. I'm not asking for anything. Only thing I'm asking is Yiskalav Yiskalav Shmei Rabbah. And like supposedly this is a Chaim say over the story. It's a famous story. In Lubavitch they say it over. In Brisk they say it over. It's a very, very it's a touching story of the spot that the Cantonists occupied in Jewish history. Now, at the end of the Cantonist Tkufa, there was something called chappers, where basically the quota was, the way the system was, is the government, the Tsar, gave a town. It was about 4 to every 1,000. 4 to every 1,000 people had to join the army, and the community themselves could choose who to go. Now, in a good, honest community that wanted to do the right thing, you'd make a girl. It's an even girl. Whoever wins, wins, or loses. But invariably, that's not how it was done. And the poor, and the Yisaimim, and the criminals, and the maskilim, and whoever was the degenerates of the society were the ones who were sent to the army, either through rigging or because everybody else bribed and got away with it, to the point where at the end of it, the last few years of the Cantonist decree, there was something called chappers, where they ran out of good options to give the Tsar, and the community would hire kidnappers, unfortunately, who would sweep through the community and pick up children and deliver them to the Tsar's army. The Chavetz Chaim supposedly said that the reason why Russian Jewry, which comprised of 3.5 million Jews, was totally wiped clean under Stalin, under the Iron Curtain, right? They were totally destroyed, was because of the tremendous Aveira, or whatever you want to call it, that the communities participated in giving soldiers to the Tsar's army. Chavetz Chaim, when he was looking back, he said it's yitachin, that the reason why this community was punished so severely and there was nothing left of them is because of this, this problem. So the shaila that I want to handle is, mamash this nakuda. Are you allowed to save yourself at the expense of someone else? Meaning, let's put yourselves back in the shoes of a Jew in 1840 in some village in Russia. You have a child, 13-year-old child, and the order comes down from the government, we need soldiers, and you happen to have a connection with some government official there, and if you bribe to make sure that your yankel doesn't have to go to the army, it means that your friend Shmerel's kid has to go to the army instead. That's what it means, because there's a quota, right? So that's a personal question. Could you do it on your own? What about if you're doing it for a third party? You're just like an askin. Somebody comes. What is it? What?
You're not directly giving somebody else. You're just,
right, not directly giving someone else. Exactly. You're helping yourself, which automatically is going to lead to hurting someone else. What's the halachic parameters of this shaila of like interceding?
Question, not a.
It's a halachic question.
I'm saying, but it was regarding the spiritual, meaning also.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, the sakana is both. Russia was constantly involved in wars during the 1840s and 1850s. They fought the Turks. They fought what did I say? Yeah.
All their existence, they were always fighting.
Yeah. It's exactly. It's a very physical danger. Meaning Russia has always been a meat grinder. They take, in particular, Jewish children, send them to the front lines. That was goodbye. It was an actual physical danger. Now, what's interesting is that there's two chuvas from two very, very prominent poskim, one from a Gadol Hadar and one from the son of a Gadol Hadar, who both write about the shaila. You could tell that they're holding back. You could tell that they're not able to say what they really think because it's such a sensitive matter. But at the same time, they say something. The Chasam Sofer, I'll start with the Chasam Sofer, even though the longer tshuva is really from the other one. But the Chasam Sofer in a tshuva, in Chelik Vav, in the Likutim, in Tshuva Chavtes, he says as follows. I want to read you. It's like 2 paragraphs. I want to read it to you. He says, V'al am b'nei Yisrael, hanul kachem litzvah ha'mulcham l'malchias. They're being enlisted into the army. Hashtika yafim v'divreinu b'zeh. It's better to just be quiet than to talk about this. V'gedayli Yisrael, al karchach yalimu ayin, v'nichulam la'memunim me'akahal lasas k'reisinem l'fi azman. The Gedalim took a very hands-off approach and let the Mamunim do what they needed to do, which is fascinating. I mean, the Chasam Sofer felt that there was nothing to do about this problem. It was such an irretractable problem, meaning the need was, the government was forcing it down their throats. There was nothing to do. Either way, someone gets hurt. It's just a question of who's going to get hurt. The Mamunim are doing what they're doing, and the Chasam Sofer takes like a hands-off approach. Then he says as follows. Then this is the part you can tell he's under duress. He says, Mikal Makam Omer, this that the government could enlist people against their will and force people into the army. It's legitimate. Anybody who could, he says, a single man who has no children, no wife, he should try to enlist himself. The Chasam Sofer writes, like, if you could save other people who are in more precarious situations than you from joining the army, then you should join it instead. Now, it's interesting that other places, when they handle the shaila, they say the opposite. They say married men should enlist themselves, because a married man, he has something keeping him connected. It's more likely that he'll come back and he'll stay connected, he'll stay from. Opposed to someone who's unconnected, he goes to battle, he goes to the army, he'll never return, he'll never come back. So this Chasam Sofer says. Then Chasam Sofer says something that's very pertinent today. He says, loy abachurim leim de Torah. The only group that shouldn't go, he says, is bachrim that are in yeshiva. Shafilu le patrim malchus beferish. Even if the government didn't pater them, Mikal Makam midin Torah paturim. The Torah says that they're part of Daminam Parakamad Babasra Chasam and Aleph Hakol Kragib Pasya Filu Rabbanon Hanimil Lenafki. Well, when he brings the Gemara, fine. It says so the Bachar part is the Idach. He says this is the proper way. The proper way to decide who goes to the draft is to make an even Geril, even Stephen. Doesn't matter if you're in an Aleph yeshiva or a Gimel yeshiva, if you're Ashkenazi, if you're Sephardi. This is not what he's saying. I was going to say, well, no. He's not talking about Bachram. He's talking about people in the town. Make a girl, and then whoever the girl lands on you, then you'll already do your askanas. You'll try to bribe, you'll beg, or to hire someone to go instead of you. Go yourself. Everybody's mechayiv to help you. To just force certain people to go without making gerov, just to take the lowest echelon of society and say you're the ones who should go. Even if these people that you're sending are megali arayis and mechalei Shabbos, it's kidnapping. It's a violation of one of the aseres hadibris. So if it says to take someone who's off the derech, who isn't from, who's a bad guy, and give him to the army instead of whoever's supposed to go, instead of the normal girl, is considered kidnapping, he says.
That's physically giving over that person, not just.
Yeah. You're onto a good nakuda. 1 second. Yeah. 1 second. We'll see that in the Nedi B'Yehuda Tshuva. Okay, this is what he says. This he says, Ach mashin imtzaim ata lemeis hamoicher matzim ritzanim b'ratzi ketzev. He says there is such a black market of people who you could hire them to go to the army instead of you. Well, he says, Afagav dehem agree mikulu. Those are terrible people. Shrei b'shat nefesh masnim l'chal shabbasis v'lachal isurim. They know they're going to join the Tsar's army. They can do l'chal Shabbos. They can eat treif. He says, it's not lefnei and you could use them. You could hire someone to take over your stead. So the Chum Sofer is vague about the sugya. He writes certain basic parameters, but he's pretty vague about the sugya. Now, in a tshuva, in the child's tshuva's Nedi B'Yehuda, it's not from the Nedi B'Yehuda, it's from the Nedi B'Yehuda's son. So I said once from Gad Ladar, the Chum Sofer, once from Gad Ladar's son. Reb Shmuel Landau, who was a big paisik in his own right, but he wasn't his father, he has a tshuva. It's in the Nedi B'Yehuda, Madura Tinyana in Yeridei Simonai Dalad. He says as follows. He says, "Hine divrei ma'alase b'nuyim al kav yosher." He goes into the nuts and bolts of the sugya a little bit, and I want to just go into some of the tshuvas and the gemaras that he brings. He says as follows. He says like this: "Hine, there's no makom to be makel." Something like this. He said the shaila is as follows over here. You have a question where if I his question is, let's say about you could ask it 2 ways, but if I bribe the government to get me off the hook, and that means that you have to go instead of me. Right? So, or I bribe the government, let's say both of you are on the chopping block, and I pay money or use my connections to get you off so that he has to go. So now, ultimately, what I did is I decided to subject you to Safik B'Koach Nefashis, to subject you to a terrible, dangerous circumstance, and to not select you. Now, the son of Shmuel Landau says, you're not allowed to do that. What's the Makar? So the Makar is as follows. There's an interesting Yerushalmi in Trumas, that's, it's a very Yisraelistic source. It says as follows. The Gemara in we have to really wind it back a little bit, but the Gemara, the Tosefta in Trumas says like this. It says that a group of Goyim. Let me get to the Yerushalmi because there's a Tosefta, there's a Mishnah. Let's just do the Yerushalmi's version. It's the simplest, the most straightforward version. The Gemara says like this. It's Yerushalmi in the 8th parak of Trumas. It's a famous Yerushalmi. In the end of the 8th parak, it says like this: Tani, Sias b'nei Adam, sheyom halchem b'derech. There was a group of Jews who were traveling. Pagu lehem Goyim. They're attacked by a group of Goyim. V'amru, and the Goyim tell them, Tnu lanu echad michem v'nahara goyim. We want to see some Jewish blood. Give us one of you and we'll kill him. Otherwise we're going to kill all of you. It's a terrible choice to make. Either give us one Jew to kill or not, we're going to kill all of you. So the Gemara says, the Yerushalmi says, Afilu kulam ne'aragim le'yimsur nefesh achas miYisrael. Even if all of them have to be killed, you don't give over one. Meaning, because for us to be yadayim, selectively give over one person, you're not allowed to. It's better everyone should die. That's Hashem's decision. Hashem will decide what happens here. It's not our decision to make. Says the Gemara as follows. There's an exception though. But yichtu lahem echad. Let's say the Goyim came and they surveyed the group. We want him. Give us him to kill. Everyone else is free to go. Then kigoyin Sheva ben Bechri, like the story of Sheva ben Bechri. Yimsu roisav al yahargeu. So give that guy over and don't kill him. Now, what's the story of Sheva ben Bechri? So this is a story from Navi. Sheva ben Bechri was someone who was married by Malchus. He fought with David HaMelech, and eventually, when David HaMelech's army caught up with him, he was holed up in a town. David HaMelech's army laid siege to the whole town. And it says there was an Isha Chachamas, a wise woman, who said, why don't we just kill Sheva ben Bechri and be done with this? And she had them kill Sheva ben Bechri. She provided his head to David HaMelech's army, and everybody ended peacefully. Meaning because they were here for one man. They weren't here to kill the city. They were here for one man. So you have a Ma'aser Rav, you have a story in Navi, where if there's one person who deserves to get killed, who's being asked for, you're allowed to give the person. Now there's a machlekes Rish Lakish and Rebbe Yechon on how to learn this. Rish Lakish says as follows: Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish, you can't just be they selected someone at random. They said we want him. It has to be that the person they selected was guilty of a crime. He deserves misa. So if they're coming to a town and they say, this criminal, give us this criminal who deserves to be killed, and we will leave you unmolested, but if you don't, we'll take care of the whole town, you're allowed to give it to that person. That's Rish Lakish's shita. Rav Yochanan says, even if it's totally arbitrary, the guy's not chayiv misa, still, you're allowed to give him up. Now, what do you say? The guy who's chayiv misa?
Saying he went to hide him down. He knew he was bringing him.
That's what she said. That's what she said. Yeah. Rish Lakish's shita is that it's not such a unique thing. Yeah. That's Rish Lakish's shita. Now, the Gemara brings a story over here. It's interesting. The Gemara says a story like this. Ula bar Koishev, Tavisa Malchusa, Ula Bar Koshev, we don't know, I don't know who that is, I'm sure some people do, was in trouble with the government. Arak va'azalei Lud. He ran to Lud, Gabri B'Shua ben Levi. Asan v'akfan medinasa, the government came, the police came, and they surrounded it. Amru lahan, in les atun yahaven lei, lon anon machrivim medinasa. If you don't give us this guy, we're going to destroy the whole village. Salak Abeir B'Shua ben Levi. So B'Shua ben Levi went to the criminal who was hiding out. Upaisei. He talked to him, explained to him. V'yavilon, he gave him over to him. Meaning, B'Shua ben Levi convinced him to turn himself in. And the Gemara says, "V'havi Eliyahu zachal atayv yalaf mi miskali aluye." Eliyahu Hanavi used to be miskali to B'Shua ben Levi. V'lo yiskali, he wouldn't come visit him anymore. So it says B'Shua ben Levi fasted a whole bunch of tanesim until Eliyahu Hanavi came back to him, and Eliyahu Hanavi tells him, "Iskali le amalu lumaiser sani nigla." You think I'm coming to visit a meiser? That's what Eliyahu Hanavi tells B'Shua ben Levi. So B'Shua ben Levi says, "V'lav mishnah sisi? Isn't it the halacha? Meaning, look at this price. Look at this after the Yerushalmi is bringing down with the Machlekes B'Yechon Rish Lakish. I did the halacha." So he tells him, "V'zu mishnahs chasidim? This is what like good, upstanding people do." That's the Gemara leaves off the story. Now, there's something interesting over here is that the Rambam paskins like Rish Lakish, that dafka if the guy's chayiv misa already. Now, normally there's a klal in all of Shas. Rabbi Yechon, Rish Lakish, Halacha Rabbi Yechon. Rabbi Yechon is the Rebbe. For some reason over here, the Rambam passes like this. And the Beis Yosef in the Yeridea, in Simon Kofn Zayin, he shtels on this, and he says he has a few different rationales to explain it. But one of them is, he says, you see from the fact that the Gemara follows up the Machlekes B'Yechon and Rish Lakish with the story of Ula and B'Shua ben Levi, you see that the Gemara, even though it was Machlekes B'Yechon and Rish Lakish, the Gemara seems to be favoring Rish Lakish's din. The Gemara seems to learn that Rabbi Yechanan's posture of giving over a guy because they asked for him specifically was not looked at with such an ayin toiv by Chazal. Now, Yiach Shia, the Ramah, in Yeridei and Simon Kofn Zayin, brings both deis, and is pretty machmer about it. And he said in the Nesekalim, the Shach, and the Taz, both say that even though the halacha is technically that someone who's chayiv misa and is being asked for individually, you're allowed to give over, but we're not moirin like that, and we don't really do it. So it's a very, very big shayla chamura to give over someone to the government when they're even when they're mechuyev misa, or certainly when they're not mechuyev misa, but the government asks for them. It's a big shayla. So the Noda B'Yehuda's son, Reb Shmuel Landa, starts with this. He says, first of all, right out the gate, you need to know that such a shayla is ein makom l'hakal b'davar zeh. There's no makom to be makel by a shayla like this. Because the baskinim b'yeridei Simon Kofn Zayin sha'asur limsa b'im lo yichdu l'kuli alma. Ubim yichdu pluk to the Riach and Rish Lakish. Going to farish with this after the Trumas Yerushalmi. He says, but that is not so chamer. He says, achein nidin sham alasei hu chamer yosim mikol mashoskim b'poiskim. Because over there it says that if you don't give them over, we're going to kill everybody. And over there the din is still everyone has to get killed. He says, kal v'chamer ben b'nei kal v'chamer ben nidin sham alasei einei yomer sheyareg is kulam sheyim selei yachad v'im lo yimsuru loi. He says over here, all that's threatening is that if you don't give us one person, we're going to take somebody else. He says the best approach would be hands off. You can't decide who gets to go. You have to be hands off. It's too much of a shayla chamura. You can't weigh in. Then he says something else. What about doing askanas? That was ruling out biyadayim giving, right? Like I'm going to turn in chappers. I'm going to turn in one person to the army so that I don't have to go. What about askanas? He says, what about if you want to help a guy, you could avoid it? But you know that by helping one guy, automatically what happens is the other guy is going to be on the hook. What about that? So he brings something interesting. He brings a shach who's quoting a tshuva from the Mari ben Lev, which is a very similar shaila.
Chance he would have picked the other guy in the first place, no?
He would have picked him, maybe.
Yeah.
He brings from a shach that quotes Mari ben Lev that makes a very important distinction. He says if the list came from the government and it has a list of names in it, then you're not allowed to help anymore. I mean, the government sends a list and it says, these 5 people we want, you're not allowed to work to get 1, 2, 3 of those 4 guys off the list, because automatically they're going to be replaced by other people. But he says, if the list came blank and it said, give us 4 names, then you can do all that skanas in the world to make sure that the 4 names that you care about don't end up on the list. That's the distinction he makes. He's quoting a tshuva from the Rebbe Lev, who more or less says this exact thing, and brings a fascinating raya to it. The Rebbe Lev is coming, he brings a fascinating raya to this, he said. There's a Gemara in Yivamis on the Fine Test that says something interesting. It says, David HaMelech, Klal Yisrael was facing, it's the end of David HaMelech's reign. Klal Yisrael was facing a major tzara, and David HaMelech realized that there's some open tabs, things that weren't resolved, that weren't taken care of. And he says, these things were never taken care of, let's work to fix them, and everything's going to be better. What is that? He says, Shaul HaMelech was not nispat ka'alacha. Shaul HaMelech didn't get the proper hesped, that's A. And B is the Gevonim, several of them were killed by Shaul's people, and they have some sort of open taina on Klal Yisrael, they're not happy. And Rashi points out, he's quoting a Chazal, that it's interesting that he's munning from one thing, the covet of Shaul HaMelech, and on the other end, he's munning payback, like reparations for something Shalom Melech did. So like it's mamish like davar v'yifuchay. But the Gemara tells us something crazy. It says David Melech approached the Gevanim and he says, "What can we do to make this right? What can we do to fix this?" And the Gevanim said, "This is not a money thing. There's nothing you could do to buy us off. This is the blood thing. 7 of our people were killed. We want 7 of Shaul's people to be killed." And David Melech says at that moment, and this is wild, David Melech says, "We're going to acquiesce to that. We're going to do it." But David Melech makes a gzeira that the Gevanim are never allowed to marry into Yiddishkeit. And this is the famous Gemara where it says, "Shleish semanim yesh b'umazu rachmanim b'shanim gam lechasadim," and the Gevanim don't have this, and they're not allowed to marry it. Then the Gemara tells how they selected which one of Shaul's family should be given over to the Gevanim. It says they made a raffle with the Urim V'Tumim, and whoever the Urim V'Tumim selected went. But the Gemara says, interesting like this, the Gemara says, "Vayikach HaMelech Shnei b'nei Ritzpa b'Asaya, Asher Yolda l'Shaul, Es Armoni v'Es Mephibosheth, V'Es Chameshes b'nei Micha b'Shaul, Asher Yolda." He separated like 7 people that he didn't want to be involved in this. Ma'ishna Hani, what's about these 7? Amar Rav Huna, Havirim l'fnei Aaron, Kol she'Aaron kolta, Lemisa kol she'ein Aaron kolta l'chayim. So, Masiv Rav Chuna Bar Katina, he asks as follows, says, "Vayachmal HaMelech Mephibosheth ben Yonis ben Shaul." He took Yonis and Mephibosheth, the son of Yonis ben Shaul, who was his good friend, he took him out of the running. Shalei Havira, he didn't pass him by the Aaron. So, Frekti Gemara v'chimash v'panim yesh b'davar? Could you select one over the other? Meaning, if you have to choose from Alpi the Torah, Hashem is selecting from Shaul's children who's going to be killed. How is David allowed to reach in and select one of them? Which sounds eerily familiar to the child that we're discussing. To which the Gemara says, so it says, "Bikesh of rachamim upoltei." David was bevakish rachamim, and the Aaron didn't select that person. In fact, the Gemara vakati mashapanim yesh b'davar. That's protectia. That's using pull. That's the same thing. That's David Melech using his pull with Hakadosh Baruch Hu to make sure that one person doesn't get used. So the Gemara says, "Elo shebikesh rachamim shlei kaltenu Aaron" in the first place. I have so says the Mari Ben Lev in a 500-year-old tshuva. The Mari Ben Lev says as follows: "As you see, the Gemara is making a distinction between passing by the Aaron and then David Melech begging that this person shouldn't be selected, and not having them be part of the running b'chlal. Meaning, if they were in the running and David Melech would try to get them out, they were all equal, and David was trying to get them out. That's not allowed. But if the no names were given, and to Shaila which names should be included on the list, David Melech was allowed to use his protector. So the Mari Ben Lev brings a raya from this Gemara. I think it's a beautiful raya that there's this distinction between once names are given and before the names are given. If the names are not given yet, then you could use pull. If the names are already given and it was already selected, then you can't use pull to get yourself out of it, because automatically someone else is going to be in the problem if you get someone else out of it. Now, the Shmuel continues, and he brings an interesting raya. I don't know how long I'm talking for. Okay, we'll wrap it up. He makes an interesting chiluk, and I think this is something you were addressing. And really, the Chavas Yair and the Tshuva and Reish Chavtas makes this chiluk also, is that there's a difference between helping someone else and helping yourself. He brings a raya from a bunch of sugis in Cheshem Mishpat and from Asma and a Ramah and etc. To help yourself, you're always allowed to do. Meaning, if the question is, should I get dragged into this, or should I fight to get myself out and let the chips fall, someone else might get dragged in, that you're allowed to do. It's when we're interceding on behalf of a third party, there's 2 different third parties, and you're choosing who should go and who shouldn't go, that's what you're not allowed to do. But for yourself, he brings rayas, and we're not going to go into all those rayas, but he brings rayas to the Shmuel Lando that you're allowed to do that. Now, another interesting paragraph of here, maybe we'll end with this, is he brings, he's pretty angry about this. He says, Amasha Kasav Ma'alasa, he says, D'yesham Eizin Arim Kalim Uprutzim B'Yeser. There are OTD kids. There are kids who are not doing well. Let them go to the army. That's what he says. Let them get drafted. Let's send them to the Tsar's army. He says, Ahuvi Yididai. Einanu Yechelim Laden Din Nefashis. We're not in position to dan din nefashis. Talkapanim and Aram Einam B'chlam Meiridim. These are not kids that are mechuyev to be put to death. Avsheim Noyigim B'kalos Ktas, even though they're not the greatest kids. V'harbe Hayal D'Saisa. A lot of immaturity is there. They could grow up very well. V'nitin Lahanisham B'tfiso. Makis Marad D'Kedemi. You want to give them a patch. You want to lock them up for a little bit. Fine, good. Of a Chalilu Limsais and B'yadayim. To give them over B'yadayim. V'yidach Meno Nidach. V'adichem L'gamri B'kal Das Hashem. To make such a grave decision to give someone over to the Tsar's army in a way that he's going to be ruined for life because he's, struggling in high school, that's unacceptable. He says, even though they have certain powers, that's only for very particular cases. And he says, who could dare lift up his head to make such a psak? Now, it's interesting that there's a tshuva sefer called Chesed Lavram. I think he's a Talmud Chacham sefer, but I'm not sure exactly. Where he has a whole tshuva in Madura Kama in Yeridei, I think it's tshuva Mem Dalad or Mem Hey, a whole tshuva, strenuous tshuva, to encourage people to give over the struggling kids. Like the kids who are going off, the derech, the maskilim, the ones who are, Machal Shabbos, those are the kids who are sent to the army.
He's using it as a threat, but they shouldn't go.
Yeah. He says
Like it will go back on.
Exactly. He tries. This is a 50-year sentence. We're talking about his army. This is not 24 months. This is you go, you're done. That's it. You know what I'm saying? So he has a whole tshuva where he promotes, sending the kids who are struggling. But Yech Shia, the Chassam Sofer and the Neit Behuda are both pretty clear that that's not acceptable. So I don't have a summation. So it's a fascinating shaila about benefiting yourself or benefiting someone else in a way where it's automatically going to lead to harm to someone else. There's many obviously more makaris that we could tell Sue, but the clock is the king. To be continued.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.